Hey y'all, welcome as we continue to read through the scriptures together. We're in the book of First Kings, and we're going to be moving into First Kings chapter 3 today. The nation of Israel would quickly learn that Solomon was not another David. He was a scholar, not a soldier, a man more interested in building buildings than fighting battles. David enjoyed a simple life of a shepherd, but Solomon craved luxury. David was a shepherd who loved and served God's flock, while Solomon would become a celebrity who used people to support his extravagant lifestyle. When David died, the people of the nation mourned. We'll eventually see that when Solomon died, the people begged his successor, King Rehoboam, to lighten the heavy yoke that his father had put on their backs. David was a warrior who put his trust in God, while Solomon was a politician who put his trust in authority, treaties, and achievements. In studying Solomon's life, we're going to learn that he was one of the wisest fools who ever wore a crown.
Wisest fool.
Wisest fools. David was recognized as the ideal leader, and his record became the standard by which every succeeding king after him, every king of Judah, would be measured and compared to. However, nobody would point to Solomon as a good example of a godly leader. Regardless of how much wisdom he had, no one looked to him as an example. This chapter and the next chapter will describe events that occurred during the first 3 years of Solomon's reign. And we will go ahead and start in verse 1 of chapter 3 in 1 Kings.
Solomon made an alliance with Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and married one of his daughters. He brought her to live in the city of David until he could finish building his palace in the temple of the Lord and the wall around the city. At that time, the people of Israel sacrificed their offerings at local places of worship, for a temple honoring the name of the Lord had not yet been built. Solomon loved the Lord and followed all the decrees of his father, David, except that Solomon too offered sacrifices and burnt incense at the local places of worship. The most important of these places of worship was at Gibeon, so the king went there and sacrificed 1,000 burnt offerings.
At the opening of this chapter, we don't know how much time has passed since David's death. Solomon has been ruling as the king, and he had to keep the peace in the land. And to do so, he started making alliances with nations by marrying their daughters. In these opening verses, we see that he made an alliance with Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, by marrying his daughter, which is a huge foreshadow of the coming failures as the king of God's nation that Solomon would fall into. Normally, Egyptian kings took foreign princesses, but they would rarely give up their daughters to foreign kings. The fact that Israel was making marriage alliances with Egypt shows how far Egypt had sunk and how great Israel had become as a nation in this time.
Yep.
Solomon's name comes from the Hebrew word shalom, which means peace. During his reign, the kingdom was at peace. David had risked his life in the battlefield to defeat the enemy nations and claim their lands for Israel. Solomon took a different approach. He made treaties with rulers by marrying their daughters, which explains how he ended up with 700 wives and 300 concubines. Solomon seems to have made a treaty arrangement with every ruler possible who had a marriageable daughter. Solomon may have had great wisdom, but he failed to take God's laws seriously. Deuteronomy 17 clearly points out that Jewish kings were not to have wife collections. Solomon's complex system of treaties cut into the very heart of Israel's unique position as the people of God among the nations of the world. Israel was meant to be God's holy people, chosen by the Lord himself, who carried the presence of God with them. God never made a covenant promise with any other nation other than Israel. As long as Israel trusted in the Lord and followed his ways, they would have nothing to worry about. Israel was supposed to be a witness to the Gentile nations of the one and only true and living God. Instead, Israel imitated the Gentiles, worshipped their idols, and abandoned their witness for the Lord.
Yep.
Because of this, God had to correct them by sending them into captivity in Babylon, which they were warned would happen if they didn't follow God.
Yep.
By this time, Solomon had already begun the process of building his palace, God's temple, and the huge wall around Jerusalem. Besides collecting wives, Solomon also entered into lucrative trade agreements with other nations. The nation prospered, but the price they paid for it was way too high. The kingdom only truly prospered when they trusted God and obeyed his terms, the terms of his covenant promise with them. If they remained true to the Lord, he promised to give them everything they needed and more, and to protect them from their enemies. Solomon veered his own way, married an unbelievable amount of wives, and ultimately began worshiping their false demonic gods.
He married wives like I collected comic books.
Yes, he did.
What?
Crazy. In 1 Kings 11, we're going to see the Lord's correction would come as a result of these choices. God never lets his children sin successfully. There's always a consequence. Solomon is remembered as the king who built the first temple. He made an alliance with Hiram, the king of Tyre, who gave him access to incredibly fine timbers and skilled workers. He used the many resources he was given to build the temple, his palace, a house for his Egyptian princess wife, and a stable and lots of stables, not just a stable, tons of stables for his way too many horses.
Many horses.
Visitors would come afar from all over the world to see all that he had built, and they were overwhelmed by the splendor of all the buildings. Solomon became just as fluent in collecting horses as he did wives, which Deuteronomy 17 also warned against. He built special chariot cities, plural, just to house his horses. He built cities specifically just for his horses. During Solomon's reign, outward splendor and the wealth of Israel only masked an inward decay that would eventually lead to the division and the destruction of the nation. Solomon made a great beginning, but a good beginning does not guarantee a good ending. Solomon was not perfect. Nobody is. But he truly did love the Lord. Solomon is the only king in the entire book of 1 Kings who is said to have loved the Lord. In spite of his great love for the Lord, there was a silent sin incubating beginning in his reign that would break out violently by the end of his reign. Solomon truly loved the Lord, and he was committed to the Lord in the beginning of his reign. Yet in his humanity, his obedience to the Lord was flawed. He will continue to fall more and more into the sin of greed and selfishness and pride. And throughout his reign as the nation's king, we're going to continue to see those things rise up.
So would you say more women, more horses, more problems?
Yes. People had been making sacrifices on the high places, which were open-air sanctuaries throughout the land that the Canaanites used to offer sacrifices and worship to their foreign demonic gods and idols. The temple was not yet finished, so the people used that as an excuse to justify their worship in these high places. They were not supposed to be doing this. God's direction was for them to have one central place of worship, currently the tabernacle, and not imitate the nations in Canaan by building or using high places to offer sacrifices wherever they wanted to. They were supposed to come together as one nation, one community, and worship God together.
They were supposed to be set apart, different from everybody else.
Yes. In Numbers 33:52 and Deuteronomy 7:5, the nation was directed to actually destroy these high places and the idols that were worshipped in these high places. Before the temple was built, Gibeon was actually considered the most famous and frequented high place in Israel because this was actually where the tabernacle was located, which was the only high place that there should have been within the nation. This high place was where they were actually supposed to go to worship and offer sacrifices to God. Gibeon was approximately 7 miles northwest of Jerusalem, and this was where Moses' tabernacle and the bronze altar were constructed. David moved the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem, but the altar of sacrifice was still at Gibeon. Solomon was actually where he was supposed to be correctly offering his 1,000 burnt offerings to the Lord. The burnt offerings were a picture of total 100% surrender and dedication to the Lord. The burnt offerings showed that he was surrendering all to the Lord. Like I said, he started out well. He had a good beginning. He was passionate for the Lord. He went all out for God in worship before God. He never did anything small. It would have been even better for Israel, however, if he would have gone just as all out for God in his obedience to all of God's terms instead of picking and choosing what he wanted to obey.
Yep.
And we'll continue in verse 5.
That night the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream, and God said, "What do you want? Ask, and I will give it to you." Solomon replied, "You showed great and faithful love to your servant, my father David, because he was honest and true and faithful to you. And you have continued to show this great and faithful love to him today by giving him a son to sit on his throne. Now, O Lord, my God, you have made me king instead of my father David, but I am like a little child who doesn't know his way around. And here I am in the midst of your own chosen people, a nation so great and numerous they cannot be counted. Give me an understanding heart so that I can govern people well and know the difference between right and wrong. For who by himself is able to govern this great people of yours?"
After a day of extravagant worship to the Lord blessed Solomon for his heartfelt dedication. He appeared to Solomon in a dream and asked him, "Ask, what should I give you?" God uses dreams and visions to speak to us sometimes, and he still does today. Joel 2:28 as well as Acts 2:17 both declare that God will use dreams and visions to reveal himself in the end of the end times, and he has, and he is. Millions of people have come to Jesus in places where it's actually illegal to talk about Jesus because Jesus has been showing up to people in dreams. The young kids we teach have dreams and excitedly share what God shows to them. God still uses dreams today. God's visit to Solomon in a dream is a huge revelation of God's grace as well as a test of Solomon's heart. What people ask for usually reveals what they really desire. What they desire depends on how they envision their life's calling. If Solomon were a warrior, he may have asked for victory over the nation's enemies, but he saw himself as a really super young, inexperienced leader who desperately needed God's wisdom if he were going to adequately lead and serve God's chosen people.
I think all of us have felt that way once or twice in our lives, like starting a new job or a new position, like, oh, what am I doing?
How am I going to do this? Yeah. God's wisdom involves matters of the heart. So Solomon asked God for a listening heart. True wisdom is a matter of the heart and seeks God in every direction, in every decision. Solomon had succeeded David, Israel's greatest king, and Solomon likely knew how people would be comparing the leadership of his father to his leadership.
Big shoes to fill.
Big shoes to fill. No pressure.
I mean, David wasn't perfect, but wow. He was an important guy.
He was a great king. Even more, Solomon had been called to build the temple of the Lord, an incredible task for such a young and inexperienced leader. Solomon knew he could not do any of it without God, and his humble request actually brought even more glory to God. Solomon's prayer was short and to the point. He spoke in true humility before the Lord. He first thanked God for all of his faithfulness and steadfast love to his father David. He acknowledged God's goodness in keeping David safe through all the trials that David had faced and for giving David a son to inherit the throne.
And speaking of that faithful love you just talked about in that, what is that, verse 6?
Yes.
And you continue to show this great and faithful love to him today. That faithful love, I did a little research on that one. Original text, Hebrew, hesed, chesed. I guess they're kind of the same, interchangeable, whether it starts with a K or the H, hesed. That, I looked this up. Roughly, hesed, this faithful love that's talked about right here, is mentioned roughly 250 times throughout the Old Testament. And it means a lot more than just faithful love. It's covenant loyalty, steadfast love, mercy, grace, devotion. And on top of all that, it's a faithful love to stick to that covenant even when the other party does not hold up their end of the bargain. And one of the verses that this is also referenced that stuck out was Deuteronomy chapter 7 verse 9 and 12. And then of course, how can we not talk about hesed or chesed without mentioning Ruth?
Yes.
And that entire story, Ruth,
yes.
Naomi, Boaz, all of that,
which all points to Jesus' chesed love for us.
Yep.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you.
That's all I got.
That was awesome. Thank you. Yes. So Solomon knew and realized that he was not king because God recognized some sort of incredible greatness within him or his abilities. He was king because of God's grace, like Joe just said.
Yeah.
His prayer reveals his dependency on God. He's king because God keeps his promises, and God kept his promise to his father David, and he knew that he would need God's help to rule God's nation. Solomon knew and understood that God is the one and only true king of Israel. You sense a feeling in this of Solomon being completely overwhelmed by the reality of leading God's nation correctly, especially at such a young age. Jewish historians and scholars believe that Solomon would have been somewhere between 18 and 20 years old when he inherited the throne when David died.
I can't imagine thinking about myself at 18, 19 years old and ruling anything at all. I had nothing in my life figured out. So I can understand that plea to him. I don't know what I'm doing.
I need help. Even in his young age, however, Solomon did understand the big picture and that God's promises are over the nation and that God's promises would be there forever. He recognized that he desperately needed God's help in the mission ahead for God's nation under his very young rule. Solomon acknowledged God's grace in making him king and his desperate need for God's help in the job. He was both honest and humble before the Lord. He confessed his smallness and the greatness of God and his kingdom. God had a purpose for God's nation, for his nation, and he still has purpose in his nation. He's not done with Israel. And Solomon did not want to blow it. Solomon closed his prayer by anticipating the future and the reality that he needed the Lord's wisdom to rule the Lord's nation. He asked for an obedient, receptive, and teachable heart to judge people as their king with God's wisdom of discernment between good and evil. That's quite a prayer request for a 20-ish-year-old boy.
Yeah.
He saw the value in wisdom, and he wanted to be able to walk out the call that God had placed on his life. He wanted to rule God's nation in light of God's revealed will.
Mm-hmm.
Wisdom is an important element in this time and culture, and every king had a circle of wise men who would advise him. Wisdom wasn't just the ability to make a living, it was the ability to make a life and make the most out of what life brings to us. True wisdom involves skill in human relationship, as well as the ability to understand and cooperate with the basic laws that God has built into creation. It's knowing what to do at the right time, when to do it, and how to do it. Wisdom is practical and personal. A ton of people in our world are uber smart enough to make a decent living, but not wise enough to make a good life, a life of fulfillment that honors the Lord.
It's kind of like having wisdom knowing that, hey, tomato is a fruit, but I'm not going to put it in a fruit salad.
Sure, yeah. It might, well, I mean, depending on the salad, it might.
No.
Oh, no, okay. I love tomatoes.
You would. You would. This guy would not.
Yeah. So the wisdom that Solomon asked for in the Hebrew, it's not like just a bunch of head knowledge. He wanted heart knowledge to lead the Lord according to the heart of the Lord.
Yep, there's a difference, and he knew it.
Yeah. Solomon didn't ask for a committee of wise counselors. He asked God to be his counselor. He asked for God to give him an understanding heart, because no matter how smart a person is, if the heart is wrong, life goes wrong. True understanding comes from hearing what God has to say. The word hearing equates to obeying in the Hebrew language also. When the Lord speaks to us, he speaks for us to obey. An understanding heart has insight and exercises discernment. It is able to distinguish between what is temporary and what is eternal. Unfortunately, Solomon did receive practical wisdom, but he lacked the pursuit of spiritual wisdom as he continued to reign. He started out well. He started out amazingly well, but he just went... True wisdom isn't knowledge, and along the way, Solomon forgot that. In Exodus 33:13, Moses asked for an understanding of God and his ways. Perhaps that would have been a better request for Solomon as well as he continued his reign. He should have continued asking every day, Lord, I want to understand with your heart. Give me your heart. Give me your wisdom. Give me your love. Give me your compassion. Brilliance is good, but godliness is a lot better. Solomon did love the Lord, and he did start out extraordinarily well, but he declined substantially over the years of his reign.
It's a little bit mirroring Anakin Skywalker. He started out really great as a Jedi, and then he ended up turning to be a Sith. Went to the dark side, but he came back. He came back at the end. It's okay.
Okay, good. I think Solomon did too. It's evident in his writings in Ecclesiastes, which we just walked through. Yeah, it seems like he did turn back. Also, he realized the error of his ways.
Maybe that's where Lucas got the idea for Anakin.
I'm probably. Yeah. So God can and does give spiritual wisdom, but he doesn't force us to obey. True wisdom is allowing God's word to shape who we are in our thoughts, emotions, and actions every single day of our lives. We need to pursue God every day. It's a daily choice. Our lives are built on choices, and our lives continue to be built on choices. So we have to choose every single day to pursue Jesus.
Yep. Even if we blew it the previous day.
Mercy's fresh every morning.
Yep.
Start fresh. All right, we'll continue in verse 10.
The Lord was pleased that Solomon had asked for wisdom. So God replied, because you have asked for wisdom in governing my people with justice and have not asked for a long life or wealth or the death of your enemies, I will give you what you asked for. I will give you a wise and understanding heart, such as no one else has ever had or ever will have. And I will also give you what you did not ask for, riches and fame. No other king in all the world will be compared to you for the rest of your life. And if you follow me and obey my decrees and my commands as your father David did, I will give you a long life. Then Solomon woke up and realized it had been a dream. He returned to Jerusalem and stood before the ark of the Lord's covenant, where he sacrificed burnt offerings and peace offerings. Then he invited all his officials to a great banquet.
I love that Solomon in his youth, like, he didn't know what to do. So he called on God for help, and he just continued to, like, give offerings and sacrifices, like, just pouring it out. Like, I need help. I don't know what to do. Here's more offerings. Here's more sacrifices. I surrender all to you. Help. That's what it feels like.
It does, yeah.
So the Lord was pleased with Solomon's request because it showed that he was most concerned with serving God and God's people by knowing and doing God's will. As Solomon walked out his calling as king, it became obvious to all of Israel that the Lord had truly given him an extraordinary wisdom, the wisdom that he had requested. Because he humbly asked for God's wisdom, the Lord also gave Solomon riches and honor and blessed him abundantly. Solomon saw value in God's wisdom and was blessed as a result. God always gives his best to those who surrender all and leave the choice to him. He wants his best for us. It's up to us to surrender and receive it.
Mm-hmm.
The Lord was careful to also remind Solomon that his obedience to God's covenant and his devotion to the Lord were keys to his future blessings. It's as if God knew what was coming because God is in every tomorrow. If it's unfortunate that Solomon, with all his wisdom that God had given him, his heart for the Lord, forgot this part of the agreement and gradually drifted into sin and obedience as his riches became greater and he grew a love for wealth and materialism instead of God. Because of this, God did and had to correct him because, again, God does not let his children sin successfully.
Right.
When Solomon returned to Jerusalem, he went to the tent that housed the Ark of the Covenant, and he offered even more sacrifices in gratitude and surrender to the Lord. The Ark represented the presence of God among his people and the rule of God over his people. Solomon acknowledged that the sovereign rule of God was over his life as well as the life of God's nation. Solomon knew that he was second in command. It was when he started to forget that basic rule and truth that he got himself into trouble. Kings and rulers and presidents that forget that they are second in command leads to trouble.
Kind of seemed like he started relying on that wisdom he had, like it was from himself a little bit.
Yeah.
Than he should have.
A lot of pride. Danger.
Wish I could say I never had that problem. The pride. I don't think I've ever been accused of having a lot of wisdom, but pride, yeah.
We'll continue in verse 16.
All right. Sometime later, 2 prostitutes came to the king to have an argument settled. Please, my lord, one of them began, this woman and I live in the same house. I gave birth to a baby while she was with me in the house. 3 days later, this woman also had a baby. We were alone. There were only 2 of us in the house. But her baby died during the night when she rolled over on it. She then got up in the night and took my son from beside me while I was asleep. She laid her dead child in my arms and took mine to sleep beside her. And in the morning, when I tried to nurse my son, he was dead. But when I looked more closely in the morning light, I saw that it wasn't my son at all. Then the other woman interrupted. It certainly was your son, and the living child is mine. No, the first woman said, the living child is mine and the dead one is yours. And so they argued back and forth before the king. Then the king said, let's get the facts straight. Both of you claim the living child is yours, and each says the dead one belongs to the other. All right, Bring me a sword. So a sword was being brought to the king. This had to have been interesting to watch this all play out. Like, what do you need this for? Then he said, cut the living child in two and give a half to one woman and half to the other. Then the woman who was the real mother of the living child and who loved him very much cried out, "Oh no, my lord, give her the child. Please do not kill him." But the other woman said, "All right, he will be neither yours nor mine. Divide him between us." I would have kept my mouth shut at that point, lady, but all right. Then the king said, "Do not kill the child, but give him to the woman who wants him to live, for she is his mother." When all Israel heard the king's decision, the people were in awe of the king, for they saw the wisdom God had given him for rendering justice.
Like his father David, Solomon gave people access to his throne. God had given Solomon a special gift of wisdom, and he put God's wisdom to use. People would come to his throne and seek the help they needed in times of crisis. 2 prostitutes with children visited Solomon with an issue that could not easily be resolved between them, obviously. The 2 women lived in the same house and had both recently had babies. One claimed the other woman's baby died in the night, and she switched the babies, giving her the dead baby and claiming the alive baby as her very own. Since there was no witnesses to the birth of the babies or the death of the babies, of the one baby, their case could not be tried in the courts in the normal way because there was no witness. It was one woman's word against the other.
Yep.
Using the divine wisdom that God had given him, Solomon bypassed the words of the women and went straight to the heart. Solomon resolved the issue by asking for his sword so he could split the living baby in half and give each half to each mother. The real mother was crushed and devastated and would rather give her baby up than see him killed. The other mother did not care. Solomon knew immediately that this was the real mother, the mother that absolutely did not want this baby to die. That was the real mother, and he gave her baby back.
Yep.
All of Israel heard about Solomon's wisdom and stood in awe. They quickly realized that God's wisdom was truly with him.
Yep. And there's another piece that I was thinking about with this is, so this profession that they had, I mean, it was tolerated, but not it was a law for the Israelites not to be doing, but this was tolerated in the culture.
Yeah.
But it was considered one of the most, like, they would have been in a class that was like lower of the low. Like they were despised, really.
Women were already not thought highly of.
Yeah. So King Solomon, he's this king over this big giant nation, but yet he's taking the time to hear about these 2 people's case, which would have been considered like, why are you going to waste your time with these people? Just whatever, have somebody else deal with it. No, but he did. He showed that he cared enough to listen to them, really.
Yeah. That's the heart of God.
Mm-hmm.
Good point. Jesus, the heart of God.
Speaking of.
He did more than solve our problems, and he hears everyone regardless. So he is for everyone. He cleanses us from our sin completely. He cleanses our lives, and he changes our hearts. We come to him dirty, and he makes us clean. As Matthew 12:42 proclaims, Jesus is greater than Solomon. He is greater. We can ask the Lord for more. We should ask the Lord for more every day. We should be pursuing his presence passionately. We should be pursuing his heart passionately. More of his presence and more of his wisdom and more of his heart and more of him every day we should be pursuing. He is pleased when we desire more of him, and he will answer. It glorifies God when we want more of him. He wants to bless us generously with his wisdom and his presence and his love. He loves us. He is for us. He wants the very best for us. He has good things in mind for us. He literally created us for his victory, the victory that Jesus died for us to receive. It's up to us to humble ourselves, repent from pride and greed and comfort and laziness. I don't know, whatever it is, apathy. We have so many things in this country.
Yeah, we all do. So just insert your thing here. We all got them.
We just need to repent and turn to Jesus, because revival starts with us. And if we want to see a move of God on this earth, we have to start. We have to repent. We have to be humble. We have to surrender all to the Lord and pursue him passionately every day. It's a daily choice, every single day. Do you have anything else?
No.
All right. Well, that's where we will stop for today.
There's a lot of good stuff in there.
A lot of good stuff. All right.
There's more to come.
More to come?
It's not done.
just begun this wonderful book. All right. We hope you all are having a glorious day in the Lord.